If you don't have money as a parent to send your child to school, we have this thing called manufacturing where employers are more than willing to pay for your schooling, to pay for your education, provided that it leads to a path to work for them or the industry in some fashion, and they can upskill you while you're actually working.
Adults are spending money on their children to go to university, or over there in the United States, call it college, to figure it out. So therefore, the parents are lumbering themselves with debt, and the jobs that the kids come up with may not even be able to pay off the debt for 20, 30 years? It's like madness to me.
I want to help people. I want to help young people. I want to help parents. I want to help our country. And there's no better feeling when you help somebody. It may be helping them a very small amount, or you may have changed their life. In my mind, I can't differentiate how I help people, but that's what drives me every day.
The only way you can have progress in your life to develop is to fail. And you find that the most successful people in life have failed the most. Hey Conscious Man 7 family, quick question before we start. Do you love the depth of these conversations but hate when ads break the flow? I get it. Ads can feel like speed bumps on a highway, pulling you out of that deep zone. That's why we created a way for you to enjoy every episode completely ad-free while supporting the show at the same time. For just a few bucks a month on Patreon or Locals, you'll get full access to uninterrupted episodes. You'll get direct access to me so you can ask me any questions that you have, some cool other perks like early releases, and you'll also help us keep bringing you the powerful conversations that mainstream platforms won't touch. The link is in the show notes. Join us there and be part of this movement. Ever look up and see those dull, grey skies streaked with chemtrails, and you feel your energy sink? You're not imagining it. Something in you knows the sky isn't supposed to look that way. But what if you could bring back the blue? What if there was a way to clear the air inside you and above you? That's where the 𝐓𝐞 comes in. They create powerful orgonite, tools that generate orgone energy, the life force that helps neutralize EMFs from your mobile phone, your Wi-Fi, and even 5G. It's nature's way of restoring balance, bringing cleaner air, calmer energy, and deeper sleep. Every piece from the 𝐓𝐞 is handmade, from tactical tower busters to beautiful pyramids and jewelry, crafted with the precise ingredients to generate real orgone energy. And here's the best part. They've proven it. For over 10 years, they've cleared thousands of miles of chemtrails, bringing the blue back to the skies around the world. So if you're ready to take back your weather and your well-being, go to thekhembo.com. Use coupon code CM7 for 10% off and experience the shift for yourself. Don't fear the chemtrails or the EMF. Be empowered with the 𝐓𝐞 and never feel helpless again. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned, because we have some more great content coming soon. What if the path we've been told leads to success is actually leading millions of young people into anxiety, debt, and disconnection from who they really are? Right now, over 46 million Americans carry student loan debt, while hundreds of thousands of highly skilled, highly paying jobs sit unfilled. Not because young people aren't capable, but because they were never shown another way. Hello friends, welcome back to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host Todd Cave. My guest today is Terry Iverson, a 45-year manufacturing veteran, author, mentor, and founder of Champion Now, a movement dedicated to helping young people discover purpose-driven, debt-free careers that align with how they're actually wired to learn and create. But this conversation goes far beyond careers. This is about identity, dignity of work, mental health, and how we initiate the next generation into adulthood with confidence instead of confusion. If you're a parent, a mentor, or someone questioning the path we've been sold, this episode may change how you see success forever.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You got to be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it, Hello, Terry. Welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, Todd. Thanks for having me. I'm honored.
Yes, I am really looking forward to this conversation because I find that through my journey as an adult, I have found that I was kind of lucky in the sense where I studied civil engineering. So I became a civil engineer. Now, that was just something that I thought would have been a good thing to do, but I had no idea in terms of many years ago that STEM was the real area to focus in. And I remember when I was going to university, I would hear people talking about, I would say, some quite unusual things to study in terms of things like gender studies and other social things that I always used to ask them, so what do you want to be? And the responses I would get most of the time is, I'm not really sure. And I used to say to myself, but how is it that you are going to university, you're going to spend all of this money to study something, and at the end of the day, you don't really know what you want to be? So when I met you, and, I've never spoken about anything like this on the podcast, I said to myself, you know what? This is part of the evolution of human consciousness, because we need to rewire how we think about, our careers and having purpose. And the things that we can get into today is apprenticeships, which for me, from living in the UK, is something that we have only now started to re-embrace, because Europe in general was a very much of a apprenticeship region. And then we sold the idea, as a region that, yes, go to school and get these very unusual degrees that really add no value to society. So I thought today would be a very interesting conversation to, delve into, the things that you talk about in your book, apprenticeships, and see if we can help people to find their purpose a bit, because I find that purpose is really important in this journey as an adult and in the work life,
For sure.
So let's dive right in. So you're a third generation manufacturing leader. At what point did this stop being a career and become a responsibility to the next generation?
Ooh, boy, you're diving right in big time, right? Well, I got involved in my career early in life. I was in my junior year of college in mechanical engineering, and went to night school while I was working full time. I had gotten married early, my wife and I, which is now 45 years. And at some point, I realized that I was always big into mentoring. I had been mentored quite a bit as a young person. I always felt responsible to mentor people younger than me, whether it was on my team, it was someone that I was, would fill my place as a sub or what have you. So I decided to then get into mentoring young people in general, but then more specifically, after probably about 10 years, I felt after 10 years into my 45 years, I decided that I really needed to dive in and double down on mentoring young people within our industry, within our company. And so that being said, I started doing a deep dive into technical education. And then wasn't until probably my 25th year that I started deciding to write and found my 501c3.
Okay. So was there a moment when you realized the system was failing kids, not because they lacked ability, but because they were never shown their true options?
Well, I went through that a little bit of myself, and I started going down a path of not wanting to follow the family line. This year, my family celebrates 100 years in the manufacturing sector, of which, once again, I had 45 of them. But I realized that, I was looking towards photography as a course of study, psychology, and I had a family business where, my dad, my uncles, my grandfather were already in manufacturing. And then I was really good in math and science. I took a lot of physics. I took a lot of calculus, algebra 1, 2, and beyond, differential equations in engineering, which I'm sure you did as well. And I'm like, all right, why am I doing this? Why am I going away from an opportunity that I have within the family just because I might have some preconceived notion that I can't work with my dad or work with my family? And so then I realized that, I really need to look at, okay, what's the end game? What am I going to do as a career? This was in my sophomore year in college. And, if I want to be a sports photographer, that's great. But how many sports photographers get paid to do their job? And if they do get paid to do their job rather than a hobby, how much do they get paid? And how big is that market? And the market was pretty small. So then I realized, maybe I should wise up and focus on engineering, which I did in the last 3 years of college. And then finally I realized, and I knew this quite a bit for a long time, Todd, is that education was just so theoretical that I got bored very, very easily. I was never diagnosed, but I'm a self-proclaimed ADHD kid or adult. And so my attention span is very short. And so the way people taught and the way teachers taught was at a blackboard. We didn't have computers back then, right? And so, I wanted to apply what I was learning, not just learn theoretics. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I find that, today we have this idea that we need to follow, in Barbados, we call it follow pattern, which is like we have to follow exactly what everyone else is doing. Mm-hmm. And I find it interesting that you said that you just felt like, you had to like do something different, because for myself, I always felt that way. I never felt right fitting in with just the crowd and just following everyone,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And like I said, I found that at university, people would be studying these things that were kind of like abstract concepts, and they didn't have an idea, and they would always have and obviously to go to university has a lot of debt,
Mm-hmm.
So you've spoken openly about student debt as a career killer. When did you see the emotional and psychological toll of debt, not just the financial one?
Well, when I got married while I was in college. And at that point, my dad said, look, you're married, you got your own family, you're going to have to pay for any college going forward on your own. And he had personally committed to, 4 years of college. And the first 2 years, I kind of towed the line. Then I got married, and then I went to night school. So I started actually physically paying for it. I was working full time and going to school at night. And I'd get home at probably midnight, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then start all over at 6 o'clock the next day, which I also did in high school, by the way. I worked when I was in high school. But that being said, when I started paying for school myself, I decided, I really need to make sure that what I'm doing is worth it, is worth the cost, is worth the time. I'm spending time away from my wife. And we had young children at the time. And I said, am I getting the value that my time and money is worth in my career and my expertise that I get paid for a living? And the end result was I was in thermodynamics till midnight one night, and I'm sitting there looking at all these theoretical equations and concepts, which I understood. And I'm like, no, this is not worth my money. But more importantly, it's not worth my time away from my family. I had a very keen awareness and understanding of mechanical concepts and engineered concepts. Mathematical concepts came very easy to me. And so I went home that night. I said, asked my wife, I go, is it okay if I quit school? And she looked at me, she goes, why are you asking me? And I'm like, well, you're the one that doesn't see me. I leave basically Monday morning at 7:00, and you don't really truly see me until Friday night at probably 6:00. And I said, that's not fair. I said, but I don't need a piece of paper just to say I have a piece of paper. I know that I understand these concepts. They make sense to me. They've always made sense to me. I'm bored to death till midnight after working till 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm sitting in this class learning theoretics that theoretically, bore me to death. And it's not hands-on and it's not practical knowledge. And so I had a keen understanding that I was not going to do what everyone thought that I should be doing. I was good. I figured out I know what I got to do, and that's when I quit.
Wow. That's very interesting because, I guess most people would say, oh, well, you need to go to school to get a nice job and this and the next and the third. So was she supportive, or she was neither yes or no? It was just like basically do whatever you think is right for you.
Well, she knows my intentions were right. My intentions were, I knew the capability that I had, and I understood concepts, and I needed to move into not theoretical concepts, but practical application of concepts. And in my work, selling machine tools, and in my work, watching people manufacture all different products, I was very comfortable in that. And I thought, you know what? I need to give that time that I'm losing more in the family. And keep in mind, it's not like I was, cutting corners in the morning or in the afternoon from my workday. This was, after hours that I'm cutting in, half days, almost 6-hour segments out of my life. And so she was supportive and has been and always was supportive, that she knew that I knew myself better than anybody else. And that if I was comfortable with it, she was totally comfortable with it. And I was always able and fortunate to provide for our family. And at that time, it was during I think it was right before the 83 recession of 83, which was pretty serious. And so it was a little tight at times. Even though my tuition was, fairly expensive, this was in Milwaukee when we first got married. The fact that I could focus more on my career and apply what I had already learned, that piece of paper wasn't going to, make a difference. Let's put it that way. Because 6 years of college was quite a bit. 3 years full-time and 3 years part-time.
Okay, so what did mentoring young people teach you about how differently humans learn compared to how schools are structured today?
Well, every young person that I've mentored over the decades, I would have gregarious people that wanted to talk all the time. That was me when I was young. And then I had other young people that were quiet and wouldn't say a word, wouldn't ask a question. And universally, what I would tell both sides of the equation is that the young people that didn't speak up or ask questions, I'd say, look, we're going to stop the mentoring process unless you ask a question, because I can't help you if you can't tell me what you're not understanding. And so I said, the only question that's a bad question is the one that's not asked. And so I actually would have young people in a group setting, and there'd be 10 young people. This is an actual case where I had 10 young people, 3 asked questions right away. They wanted to ask 5 questions each. I said, no, we're good. We're good with you guys. And then we had 3 young people that, would, eventually ask a question. And then there was 4 people that wouldn't say a word. And I said, okay, you 4 you have to understand you're doing yourself an injustice, because if I'm hiring and you're interviewing, these other 6, at least I have some insight on what they're good at, what they're bad at, the fact that they can communicate. But now I've just excluded you because you guys haven't even given me into the window of what you can do or what you're capable of or what you don't understand or what you want to know about me or my company. So we sat there for probably an extra 45 minutes until those 4 actually asked questions. So what I did was I used peer pressure of the other 6 sitting there looking at them to motivate them, if my words weren't adequate enough, to actually ask questions. And it was awesome. But the other thing that I'll say is that of the people that asked questions or actually wanted to talk and they just wouldn't hush, and I was guilty of that at one point, is I would say, okay, hold on a second. Now ask me something so I can then give you some information that you can use. So mentoring young people, everyone's different. And I think any employer is going to be different. We're all different human beings, and that's a good thing. But mentoring can only be a communicative process, a back and forth. And the one thing I tell young people also about mentoring is there's such a thing as reverse mentoring. So if you have an old person like me with white hair or gray hair or whatever, and I have all this knowledge from a legacy and tribal knowledge from just being so old, doing one thing for so many years, that doesn't mean you as a young person can't help me about technology or something, social media, because, that's new to me, but it's not new to you. Whereas a lot of the old legacy and tribal knowledge that I've developed, that's new to you, obviously. So reverse mentoring is also something that's very viable.
It is true. And I find that asking questions is really powerful, because I find that because I'm a coach, and what I find is that one of the strategies that I use to try to get the best out of my clients is I would ask them questions, right? And I find that even in relationships, that actually works really well, because what happens is that if we do less telling and we do a little bit more asking, we can actually draw out people's inhibitions. Like what is like the deep underlying inhibition, the thing that impedes them, that fear, that trauma, that thing that makes them nervous. So when you ask questions now, you can actually get to the root cause. Because I did a course in England when I was a civil engineer called root cause analysis, and it's a certification from the British Quality Institute. And basically, we did a whole course in a day to come to this point. Ask why 5 times, basically. And when you ask why, and then you ask in another way why, by the end of the 5th time you ask why, you get to what is the real reason. And I found like what you said just now quite ironic, where you said you use a little bit of peer pressure to ask questions, because then now you can actually draw out what is the real thing that maybe is stopping them from being from participating more in the actual lesson, in the actual mentoring session. Then when you ask questions, you can find out, okay, well, this kid's strength is this, that one is that. So I need to use 2 different approaches to get the same result, because as you said, we're all different human beings and we have different strengths and weaknesses and we learn differently. So by asking questions, you can actually find out, well, I need to use that strategy for him, that strategy for her, and then, a different one for the person sitting at the back of the room, So I found that quite interesting when you mentioned that, So let's talk a little bit now about the idea of success, the narrative that we've been sold about what success looks like. So why do we still equate intelligence with academic performance when manufacturing proves brilliance shows up in many forms?
Oh boy. Well, Todd, our culture is a very powerful thing. Our peer pressure, peer feedback, impressions, perceptions are also very powerful. And I think we don't empower young people to be confident. And it's a very careful balance between arrogance and confidence. I've told my grandkids and my kids that I was really fortunate. I believe that athletics, you can learn a tremendous amount about life and about yourself in athletics. I played soccer, I played football, and some other sports. But I said, I really appreciate, and this is going to seem very ironic, I really appreciated being one of the best players on the team, but I also experienced being one of the worst players on the team. And so that being said, I learned early in life that, you've got to apply what God's given you. And if you don't, then shame on you. And you have to, if you're going to truly experience success, it has to be defined by you first, not by a boss or not by even a spouse or a significant other or a mom or a dad. You need to define what your priorities are and what success looks to you. And probably should do that before you choose your course of study or your career choice. Because if money is your determinant of success, well, then that may have a path that's entirely different. If popularity is a facet of success, then that's something else. If traveling the world is deeming what your success, and the one thing that I talk a lot about in my first book, Todd, is parenting. Well, there's no greater gift in this world, in my opinion, than being a parent. And so being a good parent is a level of success that only you and your spouse, the maternal parent and the fraternal parent, can define. And many times you don't really truly know until they grow up, until you see the path that they define as being success. So I think our culture is very jaded in how success is defined. And I guess my advice would be, make sure you understand what success means to you. And then that will clear and clarify what your path should be as a career or what your path should be as far as course of study.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because I find that, our society has kind of sold us this lie where money is the most important thing. Now, money is important, but the path to how you get money is different. There are many different paths. And I find that when kids go to school, I've said before that they're on the verge of genius when they enter schools. And when they come out, it just seems like most of them are like automatons, robots, zombies. They're just regurgitators of information. They're not taught how to think. They're told what to think. All of the mindset is in a particular box. And I like what you said about sports, because I was a sportsman. I was an athlete. And now thinking about it, maybe that is why I think a little bit differently, because, you have to sort of like, when you were now starting, like you said, you're the worst person on the pitch or on the field or whatever discipline it is. And then it's through like hard work, dedication, discipline, commitment, and then thinking differently, because if you're trying to improve in one thing and that's not working, you're kind of forced to think outside the box to find what works for you. And then through that process, you're defining success. And I find that conversation doesn't really happen much with kids, even with adults, because most of us don't even know what success really looks like to us. We're just going on the model that we've been sold. Go to school, get a nice secure job, work for 40 hours a week, work for 40 years of your life, and retire on 40% of your salary. And sadly, that model is over, right? But the software is still there, thinking that that's how it works, So I think that, conversation like this is coming at a right time, where we're going through a lot of changes now. And I think that we need to sort of get back to the older ways and what worked, So is it fair to say that for many families, college or university has become a fear-based decision rather than a purpose-driven one?
Ooh, man, you really thought good on these questions. So college education is the safe route. And, if you look at a blueprint, or if you look at a map, the one that gets you there safely and fairly quickly, you're like, okay, I can do that. I think what we do as parents sometimes, Todd, many times, many of us, is that we don't really challenge our young people to understand what ignites them and what fuels them before they make the decision of what they want to go into. For those of us that are fortunate enough to save money and want to send our children to college, many of us motivate, from a monetary standpoint, we motivate ourselves to save enough to do something, life-changing for our child. And for a lot of that, that's education. And that concept, there's nothing wrong with that concept. But I think where we fall short as parents is we basically send them off to school. And let's say we've been very fortunate to save money to do that. We send them off to school just so they can figure it out. And I say, no, that's not good enough. Challenge your young people, challenge your kids when they're at your home, where you can have dialogue of, and if you have 3 kids, that could be 3 different things. And challenge them to understand, well, what are you passionate about? What can't you not wait to do that you're just so excited about? And if you can channel that into a career, and of course, yes, you have to figure out if the monetary compensation and salary levels are going to satisfy your personal needs as a family or as a young person. But if you can find that before you ever get into an educational path, that's the ticket right there. And if you don't have money as a parent to send your child to school, we have this thing called manufacturing, where employers are more than willing to pay for your schooling, to pay for your education, provided that it leads to a path to work for them or the industry in some fashion, and they can upskill you while you're actually working. So there's all sorts of different paths, but the one thing I'd say to parents is, let's not let our young people out of the household until we've challenged them individually, not together, so that we understand what their path of passion, that's the one I just made up. So their path of passion, which ultimately will lead to success, if we understand what their aptitude is, what their God-given talents are, and match those with a career and an educational path that suits each individual child.
Right? I wanted to laugh, Lodi, when you said that we will send our children to university or college so that they can figure out. And I'm like, hold on a minute. So we're just going to chuck money into the ether to allow the children to figure out what they want to do, who they want to become, etc. And I'm like, this is insanity. Like, it just doesn't make sense because, and I totally agree with you. Like, I guess I was a little bit different where when I wanted to become a civil engineer, I knew from a young age, and because I was like 14, and I was doing technical drawing at school, and I had loved technical drawing. And I remember that they had a bit of like an expose or something like that, where like they had people from industries came to the school, and they talked about civil engineering. And I said to my mother, I want to be a civil engineer, and that was it. And
that's awesome.
I was like, at the time, my career progressed slightly differently than how I thought when I was 14. But what it was is that it was building. And I was like, okay, I like technical drawing. I can do drawings but I want to be in construction, right? I knew that. And she asked me, are you sure? And she asked me the questions like, why you want to do it and stuff like that. And I said to her, well, Mom, I like technical drawing. I like designing. And I think that, I can be good at it. And it looks exciting and fun. And that was it. So I went to the Barbados Community College, studied building and civil engineering. Then I went to the UK and did civil engineering, and I became a civil engineer. So for me, from the age of 14, it was quite clear what I wanted to do and become. So we had that conversation before she actually spent a ton of money sending me to university. Mm-hmm. But now hearing what you're saying, it's kind of like, hold on a minute. Well, most parents don't even ask their children, like, why? Like, do you like it? Like, do you know what the salaries were? I didn't think about salary at the time, but all I knew is that I like this technical drawing thing. I was starting to draw houses and stuff. I was like, yes, I like this, so I can just do it. So I always seemed to follow my passion. My mother never, when it came to things that I liked, she always backed me, always allowed me to do what I wanted to do. And what you were saying, like the path to passion, right? That passion thing is what spurred me on to become a civil engineer. But it is almost like if maybe for the majority of parents and households, that conversation doesn't take place. So adults are spending money on their children to go to university, or within the United States, call it college, to figure it out. So therefore, the parents are lumbering themselves with debt, and the jobs that the kids come up with may not even be able to pay off the debt for like what, 20, 30 years? It's like madness to me.
Well, let me say this. Parents, they think that they're doing right by their child or their kids because they save the money. This is what they wanted. So it's very admirable. So let me say that. It's very admirable that mom and dad, whoever it may be, first of all, your mom's awesome, by the way, that mom or dad saved this money and this is what they want to do. But what they're missing is that they're doing their child a disservice by allowing them to take 4, 6, 7, 12 years to figure it out. It's not just 4 years of college. Here's a statistic that I found when I was writing my second book. If you take the number of young people that go to college, that finish in 4 years, 5 years, or 6 years with a degree, and key point here, and use that degree in their profession, we are only talking between 7 to 15% max of all the young people. So why are we doing this as a culture when we're 85 to 93% of us have got it wrong? 7 to 15%, good job. Okay, that's good. But our culture is preaching to that 7 to 15%, not the 85 to 93%. So, case in point, our culture needs to change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because, and I found it like through my journey when I became a civil engineer and I would talk to other people and I would ask them, so like, what do you want to be? And most people couldn't tell me, but it was an easy open and shut case for me. Mm-hmm. I want to be a civil engineer. I became a civil engineer. I did that for many years. So for me, I always found it like people be studying like English literature and history and sociology. Okay, great. So what do you want to be? And they would just shrug their shoulders and they'd be like, I don't know. And I'd be like, I mean, you don't know. So you're going to just like do all this time in university and come out. And for me, it just felt like that doesn't make sense. But I guess I think about it, I always think differently. So, and then I had like the right environment at home. My mother, where even with sports, like every single sport I wanted to do, she says, okay, Todd. And she backed me. And then that was it. So even when because I just interviewed, I mean, that episode will probably come up before this one, a lady talking about Montessori. And she said the same thing. She says, Todd, you had a great mother because I never had restriction on anything I wanted to do. As long as it was like, I mean, like with tennis, you had to buy tennis racket, get the racket restrung and stuff like that. So that was a little bit of an expense as a child, right? But other than that, my mother always made the time to take me every single where. Like my grandfather used to take me to tennis as well. And, you know, it was knowing, think about it, my childhood, every single sport I wanted to do, everything I wanted to try, literally, I never was told no. And I guess maybe this is why I have so many different types of experiences and I'm like a jack of all trades, because I used to be a civil engineer. Now I'm a coach and a podcaster having conversations like this. And it's because I always followed my passion, you know? So
you're very fortunate too, because every young person deserves that. For sure.
It's true. So you've asked a powerful question. Mm-hmm. Have I failed my child by not affording college? What's the real answer?
I don't think, someone asked me this. a mom, after I was speaking to a group of parents, it was a small group. I wish it was a larger group, but she came up to me and she had tears coming down her face. And I'm like, oh no, what did I say? Right. And I said, well, I hope what I said didn't upset you. And she goes, no, 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 no. These are tears of joy. You're basically telling me I didn't know anything about manufacturing. I could not send my child to an expensive college. I thought I failed him. And I said, well, you're here. Your child is here. Your son is here. I said, so that's a start. He's looking to invest in his future and figure out what he wants. But no, he looks healthy. He looks attentive and respectful. I think you did your job. I said, you haven't failed your child, but it's okay if young people decide the manufacturing's not for them. I totally get that and I embrace that. But what I'm really not okay with is for them not to even know about it. And that's on us as a culture. That's on us as parents. That's on us as a country, that and an educational system. For manufacturing to be as big as it is in the United States, even with a lot of things going over to China over the years and offshoring and then reshoring, we still have 12 million people in manufacturing in this country. And if manufacturing was measured by itself as an economy compared to all the other industrialized nations, their entire economy, manufacturing in the US, just manufacturing, is 8th or 9th largest economy in the world. So when people say, we don't do much manufacturing anymore, I'm like, no, we do. We don't do as much as we used to. And because of automation and because of advancements and productivity gains, we have less people involved, absolutely, for many reasons. But now what's happening is technology is really taking over manufacturing in a big way. So the skills you need are becoming higher and higher. And guess what? When you get those skills, the pay is commensurate with the skills. So you actually have higher pay the more you're able to provide or offer to your employer.
It is ironic that she asked that question because I don't have children yet, but I think differently. And I said, when I have children, I am going to get them involved in entrepreneurship very young. Because, for example, selling lemonade to their neighbors, washing their cars, etc. Because I think that's a very intuitive way to get them to learn about money, responsibility. Mm-hmm. Because if you're selling lemonade, you need to buy lemons. If you're going to be sweetening it, you need to, whatever sweetener you use, you need to put back in the money in the till to be able to buy that. Instead of just like learning how to count 1, 2, 3, 10 times 10 is 100, X, Y, Z. When you have the physical money they're counting, they'll learn to count way faster. And I think that things like that are much more powerful than just sending children to school to become automatons. And their math will be much better than a kid that just spends 40 hours a week in school. And then their social skills would get way better because they have to have customer service in order to sell. Like if the lemonade wasn't cold enough, they would say, they would get feedback. Okay, I need to make sure it's colder, so I have more ice. Maybe I need to bring a cooler, X, Y, Z. So all of these are things that they end up figuring out, which are life skills. So it was really good that, you had that conversation with her, because I think a lot of parents feel that way because they may not have the money to afford to send them to university. And they feel like this guilt where like, I've failed. But I say to people, well, if your son or daughter has a business and they're earning well and they can support themselves and a potential family, I think that's a form of success. Instead of going to school and studying these subjects that because a lot of, I don't remember how much it was, but I remember, this is going back in the early 2000s, it would probably cost about maybe £15,000 a year to send a person to university, maybe even 20. So we're talking in the United Kingdom is 3 years. So we're talking maybe £60,000 to go to university, right? Now, in most cases, when you come out of university at that time, you would start on say 20,000, right? Now, in my case, as being a civil engineer, you get up to the higher tiers after 5 years. But in some of these other things that people study, they're like the plateaus are really, really quick, and there's no possibilities to advance. And then when you add in bills and rent and XYZ, these student debts take years and years and years. And in my case, well, me and my mother, we paid off those like pretty quickly because, you know, I mean, I started off on a decent wage, and then after like 5 years, my salary shot up. And then even just before my whole refinement period started, I was doing kind of well because I even helped put my sister through university as well, right? Because engineering, right? But that's in STEM, right? So that I was in the 7 to 15%, the 13% that you were talking about, right? So, you know, not everyone is that lucky, you know? So how much of this crisis is about status, and how much is it about parents projecting their unfulfilled paths onto their kids?
Oh boy. Well, one of the things that I talk about is that sometimes as parents, we get wrapped up in how proud we are of our kids. And there's nothing wrong with that. But are we proud about the right things? Are we proud about the integrity that they show? Are we proud about the honesty that they exude in everything they say and do? Or are we proud about the fact that you're paying X number of dollars to go to ABC College or XYZ University? So think about when, as adults and parents, we get together and then, you know, you're going around the conversation and, you know, my child's going to this school or my child's going to that school. Are we bragging about the wrong things? You know, anybody can write a check, no offense, and send a child and enlist in school and get accepted. But are we proud instead about our son or daughter sticking up for somebody that's being bullied and making sure that they stand up to somebody that's not being fair or not being good to another human being, to another person their age. When you talk about mental health, I mean, that's what we should be proud about. But accountability, we've lost sight of accountability. And to your point, as far as entrepreneurship, creative thinking and critical thinking. Entrepreneurship absolutely and positively answers the need and the process of critical thinking. You know, if you didn't order the sugar and you have sour lemonade, you're going to learn one time that I guess I should have done that. So accountability, whoops, I didn't do it. Critical thinking, I won't do that. I won't not do that again, right? So, you know, I was brought up that integrity was first and foremost. Honesty was first and foremost. My 3 adult children only saw me get irate, not upset, irate, maybe 2 times each. And all 6 times, and I mean irate, I mean off the charts, get out of my way. You do not want to be around this maniac, okay?
Wow.
And those were over disrespect to their mom or lying. Those are 2 things in our household that we did not stand for. Either disrespecting either myself or, more importantly, my wife, their mom, or lying to either one of us. And I must say that we were so blessed, and I don't think it was because of those 6 times I blew up, but we were so blessed that I'm very proud, regardless of the financial gains of my kids, our kids, or the accomplishments of our kids. They are great human beings, honest people that are integrity-based in everything they do. So.
Integrity is huge, and everything is built on integrity. The entire civilization really is built on integrity. And I think that that's the reasons why our civilization is the way it is now, because there's a great lack of integrity. And the integrity starts with ourselves. We don't even have integrity with our own selves. So we tell ourselves lies. So if we tell ourselves lies, we can't tell someone else the truth because, like I've said before, you can't give someone something that you don't already have, you know?
Right.
And that is quite interesting that you said that. And I do agree, like I said, I wouldn't want to send my children to school in a traditional sense. And I think that, and it is different from homeschooling, is about, for me, from the time they're like, they can count, we're going to teach you to be an entrepreneur and you're going to be selling whatever it is you like to do, even if it's buying toys and selling toys, right, to other kids. We can find something that you like to do, because I think for me, being an entrepreneur myself, it is the thing that teaches you the most about life. And I tell people that if you really want to learn about life and you want to learn about yourself, become an entrepreneur. It is, okay, so this statement I can't say is true or not, but I think that both of them are equally difficult. Being a parent and being an entrepreneur. I think both of them, and if you're both at the same time, I think it's doubly hard, because kids show things in you that you don't know about yourself. Being an entrepreneur shows you things about yourself that you didn't know, because you have to put yourself out there. You have to market yourself in a way, maybe use social media, maybe do podcast interviews, maybe you have to learn to sell. All of the things that are holding you back internally are going to show up, because it's going to affect the business. So to be successful, you're going to have to come out of your comfort zone. And that is what being an entrepreneur does. It forces you to come out of your comfort zone. And then if you want to be a good parent, so that you don't put your beliefs or traumas and fears on them, you have to heal those things so that you don't give them those things. Exactly. You have to heal those things first. So I'm thinking that being an entrepreneur and a parent are equally difficult, with slightly different sides to the coin, but teach you about life the same way, because one gives you direct feedback because the other one's a human. The other one gives you a little bit of a delayed feedback, because at the end of the month, when you have to pay wages, then you see it. With the children, you kind of see it directly, like instantaneously. So I think slightly different, but I think equally of difficulty. But I would have to ask you, because you are both.
Well, let me interject. I will say the most important responsibility, this is in the subtitle of my first book, the most important responsibility we have as human beings on this planet is to be a parent. And I'll speak to all the single parents or all the parents that are maybe a stay-at-home parent. There is a definition of success that needs to be admired and elevated, and that is, if you're a parent that stays at home and takes care of the children, you have the most important job. And if you are raising responsible, honest, integrity-based small beings, which are become adults, that is the most important element, or that is the most important role in society. We don't acknowledge it as a culture, and I don't know why we don't acknowledge it as our culture. But people that raise children in a way that leads to all the things I just mentioned, that needs to be a level of success and acknowledged as being a level of success, because that is the most difficult task. So to answer your question, or to build on your comment, I don't think they're equally challenging. I think the business is going to grow, the entrepreneurial element, it's going to grow the way you tell it to grow. And so if you want it to go right, it's going to go right. When you have a human being, a small human being that's growing, they're going to have different opinions. So they're not necessarily going to go the way you want. They're going to go a different way, and that might be better, it might be worse. So it's almost like a boomerang that isn't coming back. It's going, but it's not coming back. So they're both difficult, but when there needs to be a proclamation within our society, within our culture, to acknowledge that parenting is the most important thing in our world. And if you're successful as being a parent, then you shouldn't have to have any other definition, whether you're a business person or not, whether you're in the working world or not. You're successful because you've, kept them healthy. You've, like your mom, for example, your mom supported you, and your mom was, regardless of what she did beyond parenting, she was a very successful person.
Thank you. And thanks for giving context to that, because I think that a lot of people struggle internally in terms of if they're being a good parent or not, the societal pressure to do certain things. And like you said, when parents get amongst themselves, almost quotation marks bragging, well, I sent my kid to this top school and that school and they did this and that. So I think that the distinctions that you made are quite useful, valuable. And I think that it gives the parents listening another voice that to consider that maybe the way they're thinking and what they're doing may not necessarily be how it's supposed to be. So let's transition into apprenticeships, purpose, and life initiation.
Okay.
So you've described apprenticeship as purpose discovery in motion. How is this different from classroom-based education?
Well, the apprenticeship model is, I don't think it ever waned in acceptance, popularity, or implementation in Europe as much as it has in the United States. And so what's interesting about it is apprenticeship, you have to decide that apprenticeship, the apprenticeship model makes sense to you. Many times it's doing something, you're learning something, but you're also doing something. It might be an electrician, might be a machinist, might be a plumber, might be a carpenter. It could be any one of those things and more. But the fulfillment, and we didn't talk about mental health, but one of the conversations that I think we should at some point get to is if you're fulfilled in what you're doing and you feel good about finding that path of passion, then generally speaking, your mental health is going to be much better. If you're integrity based and if you're confident in what you do well and know what you don't do well, from a mental health standpoint, you're going to be a lot mentally stable and mentally healthy if you know your pros and your cons, where you can improve and where you shine. So I think there's a lot of different apprenticeship models that are now coming back in the U.S. and gaining more esteem and more acceptance. In my first book, I talk about how I think internships should be blended into apprenticeships so that, I made up a term called apprenticeship. Can't even say it, so it's not really a good term. But it means that if an internship is embedded either before, during, or after an apprenticeship, that you have the best of both worlds, because internships are awesome and apprenticeships are awesome. So I think if a young person goes into an internship prior to developing a path of education after high school, just that internship alone may fill the void that maybe the school wasn't able to fill and maybe mom and dad weren't able to fill. In that, well, I tried that and I absolutely hated it. I'm like, okay, that's okay. Then the next internship, they're like, this is the best thing that I've ever done. That's what a young person needs. And if it comes from mom and dad, great. If it comes from school, great. But if it comes from internships, even better.
Yeah, definitely internships and apprenticeships are fire because you're getting hands-on experience on how it really is. And this is why I wanted to get you on the show, because I think apprenticeships are golden, because back in the day when a kid was 13, if you wanted to be a seamstress, you wanted to be a plumber, an electrician, or a mason, you want to design plans, whatever it is, you went and studied under that person for 5 years and you learned every single aspect of that job. So after 2 years, you could say, well, you know what, this is not for me. But if after 2 years now, because you're still be 15 and you're like, you know what, I really love this thing, you can go ahead with gusto, because like you said, it's your passion. And like I always say to people, like, this podcast for me, even though it is work for me, it doesn't feel like work, because one, I was excited to talk to you today. Two, I love these conversations because I learn as well, right? And for me, it is a passion. You know, I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose. So I would do podcasts all the time. Like, I honestly, I can't see myself not doing podcasts now, because it fits so much with where I'm going in life. And I'm just getting a front row seat to talk to the best minds in the world, learn all of these cool stuff, so that when I have children, I can put a bunch of stuff, you know, for them where they be better than me. So again, this is why I always talk a lot about finding purpose. And if you're on your purpose, the money will come, because what tends to happen is when you're finding something that, when you're doing something that's your purpose, you work longer hours, not because you're thinking, oh, I need to make this paycheck at the end of the month. You're like, I love this thing so much, I just want to get better at it. And then before you know it, you have to, like, and in my case, my mother always says, but Todd, don't forget to sleep. Because, because now that I'm in Barbados now, many times she has to come and turn off my light, because I will fall asleep, maybe with my phone in my hand or maybe at the computer, because for me, I just like what I'm doing, right? And if you have that, I think you have success in whatever discipline or field you're in, you know?
There's one thing that I tell young people, Todd, all the time that kind of circles around some of the things I've said. When young people, ask, do you have any, tidbits of information or advice? And I say, yeah, I do. And I tell everyone the same thing. No matter what the profession, no matter what your job or your career is, arrive early, stay late, and tell the truth. If you arrive early, all the soft skills that everyone talks about, being dependable, being on time, okay, check. You got that one checked. If you stay late, then anyone mentoring you, how many times someone's a mentor, they're mentoring someone, and all of a sudden, that end of day bell rings in their head, and then, they're out the door, or God forbid they leave early. Now, who's going to really mentor you or feel good about it and pour all their expertise into you if you're 1 foot out the door when you're right in the middle of a sentence? And then if you're, tell the truth, it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that much of a goal to achieve. It should always be the case, but it's not. Either because people don't have the confidence to tell the truth, or they feel like they may get in trouble if they tell the truth. My mom taught me something, Todd. She said, Terry, go do what you're going to do. If you get in trouble, get out of trouble, because you got there. So, don't call me to get you out of trouble. That's the accountability piece, right? And she said, if you can't tell me what you're doing, there's a good chance that maybe you shouldn't be doing it. So,
very, very, very well said. Now, what life skills do apprentices develop that are almost impossible to teach in a traditional academic environment?
Well, I think anytime you're working with your hands, you're going to learn something different than what theory will teach you. You went to engineering school, so did I. And one of the things that they, in Europe, when they draw a part, European apprentices are taught how to make things. Or I should say, European engineering students are taught how to make things. And so they understand when they're defining something, what it's going to take. So when they design it in such a way that it's achievable, if that makes sense. And then in the US, we teach, and this is an industry accepted opinion, in the US, we teach all theory, but not all our engineering students in the US know how to make things. So an instructor at Purdue, engineer, very well educated engineer, said, Terry, it's a known fact, whether it is or not, this was what he said, that in Europe, 80% of the time, a print goes from the engineering department to the shop floor, and it's made exactly the way it's drawn. 20% it goes back to rewrite, to be redesigned. Whereas in the US, a print hits the shop floor, 80% of the time it's going to get rewritten. And 20% of the time it's actually, made as drawn. And so that speaks to the theoretical component of our education in our country and the lack of appreciation for making things and doing things versus learning. And so, we get back to critical thinking. It's hard to critical think when you don't make mistakes. And it's hard to make mistakes when it's all theoretical, right? So when you're in an apprenticeship and you're making something and you're physically applying what you've learned, you find out pretty quick what doesn't work. And when you do that, someone asked me the other day about lessons and making mistakes. And I said, yeah, I was afraid of making mistakes. I had very high standards from my parents, particularly my dad, and I had very high standards for myself. But I said, if as a parent or a parental unit, I'm not saying set traps, but if we laid out challenges where the failures were very small and the acceptance of, well, you made a mistake and you learned by it, and the risk versus reward was very, a very small risk, then we would teach our young people, make a mistake, learn and challenge and achieve and know and accomplish it the next time. But what happens is we go through young people growing up and their chance of failure or their embracement of failure and encouragement for failure is so small. So they get into a career and the challenge of failure is huge. And their perception, maybe it is huge, but in reality, maybe it's not. But because they've not given the ability to fail small until they get into a career, it seems bigger than it is. So anyway, I rambled a little bit there, but I hope I answered your question.
No, it's true, because one of my mentors says that that in life you fail forward. So basically, the only way you can have progress in your life to develop is to fail. And you find that the most successful people in life have failed the most. And what it is that every time they failed, they just learned a way that it doesn't work. So most of the time when people fail, they fail because they fail to find the solution. Not necessarily that they're not good enough. It's just that their mindset was that they gave up. And the people that have the biggest success, they believed in themselves so much that even with all the failures, they just backed themselves until one day they figured it out. And I think it's just a matter of doing something over and over, thinking differently every time, doing things slightly different, and then eventually it will click and you will find, you know what, this is what works. But unless we allow ourselves to fail, and like you said, if it's a small failure, okay, I failed this one. What did I learn? What would I do differently? How can I improve? What was the lesson there? Ask yourself what and how. Eventually with time, you'll figure it out. But it appears now that failure is frowned upon so badly that if we don't get instant success, because of social media, instant gratification, is like, oh, well, I'm just going to give up and I'm a failure. And we just stay in our comfort zones and, do what everyone else is doing and become sheep, And I'm saying to people, no, don't be a sheep. Just try something differently,
Yeah, I think I go back to athletics and sports, but other extracurricular activities can apply the same way. But in sports, you really learn, okay, I'm the fastest on the team. Okay, well, I got to leverage that and use that in what I choose to compete in. Or I'm not the fastest on the team, but I have the best ball control. And so, should I be playing forward in soccer or should I be playing midfielder? Well, you and I know that answer, right? So setting yourself up for success and then having failures in the right environment is the perfect match. And so whether you're a parent or a young person, are you in the right environment first? Are you in an environment that you can succeed, or did you put yourself in an environment that you'll never be able to succeed because you don't have those skills, you don't have those talents, and you don't have the passion tied with it. So sometimes people go down this road and they think, well, I'm stuck in, going down this road. No, you're responsible for your own success, right? So if you're going down a path that's not right, well, you need to recognize that. And you know what? With AI, you and I talked a little bit about AI. There's going to be career paths that aren't the same 6 months from now, or they're going to be totally disappear. One of the best questions a young girl asked me at a school. She was in, I think, 9th grade. It was an intro to engineering class. And then once I did the peer pressure thing about, all right, she asked a question. Now who else is going to ask a question? And long story short, what happened was she said, Mr. Iverson, how do you know what career advice you can give me when there's careers that I'll be in high school for 3 more years and college 4 more years? There's 7 years is a long time. And what's going to exist as a career path 7 years from now? And I'm like, that is a phenomenal question. That's probably one of the best questions anyone's ever asked me. And I said, there's no guarantees. So you have to set yourself up to critical think about yourself, be self-aware of what path you're down so you can alter that path if that be the case.
Absolutely. Brilliant question. So can you share a specific story of a young person whose confidence and identity transformed through hands-on manufacturing?
The one story in my second book that I wrote, it was 𝐓𝐴 was his name. And this is his story, not mine. And he went to school at high school, and his high school had one of the best manufacturing programs in the whole Chicagoland area. But he knew nothing about it, didn't pursue it, got out of high school, and he and his girlfriend found out that they were going to have a child. So they got married. And his dad said, okay, man, welcome to the real world. What are you going to do? How are you going to feed your family? How are you going to support your wife? And he had no idea. So he applied for a job in a large manufacturer, and the manufacturer, he went in knowing nothing about manufacturing. And in 9 years out of high school, 9 years, he went from a newbie knowing nothing, and he would take any job. Anyone who was on vacation, he'd fill in. Anyone that quit, he would be the first in line. Anytime there was schooling paid for, he would go to the schooling at night. And he went from 0 to plant manager in 9 years' time. And if that isn't a testimony to what initiative and determination and openly willingness to do whatever, the employer needs them to do, then I don't know what is.
I tell you what, you can't even teach that in school, to be honest, because that is just mindset. That is basically, he got put under pressure because he's going to have a child. Mm-hmm. And his dad says, what are you going to do, mate? And he's like, okay, I'll do anything. And doing any job, if someone quits, he fills in. Going to school to learn, he was there. You simply can't teach that in school. That is someone who basically is like, okay, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm just going to let life show me. And I'm going to take every opportunity and grab hold of it and take advantage. And plant manager, wow, 9 years, well done. That is well done.
Yeah, it's a success story that, in fact, when I have my podcast, I think I just decided this right now, actually. I think 𝐓𝐴 might be my first interview, because that message is the epitome of what I try to preach when I speak at events, when I write, when I do podcasts, is look, do not give up on yourself. Do not think that you can't do something. Dive in and give it your best. And I know in manufacturing, people will cut you some slack if you show that type of determination and drive and initiative. They'll find a path for you to be successful some way, somehow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So why do you believe purpose must be felt in the body, not just understood intellectually?
Well, it goes back to working with your hands, and some people, many of us, are most content and most fulfilled when our mind and our hands um, are given an opportunity to succeed. It goes back to, when everything's all theory. You got to apply that theory. Just being smart and being well learned and being educated is not enough for people to be fulfilled. One of the things that I promised myself is I want to make a difference. I want to help people. I want to help young people. I want to help parents. I want to help our country. And there's no better feeling when you help somebody. It may be helping them a very small amount, or you may have changed their life. In my mind's, in my mind, I can't differentiate how I help people, but that's what drives me every day. And so that is my passion, and path to success is helping as many people as I can understand, especially when you have two voids that don't make sense. It's like a math, those of us that are good in math, and if you're engineering, path or engineer, math makes sense, right? To you. Doesn't make sense to everybody. But if you have hundreds of thousands of jobs that cannot be filled, and then you have millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people that have millions of people that have debt that they can't fulfill anytime soon or pay off anytime soon. We almost have a void where, these people need to figure out about these opportunities and bring them together somehow. And then all of a sudden you start bringing things together, and then things start to make sense.
Well, hopefully this podcast will help to bridge the gap a bit, and other people that are listening that have podcasts that are listening to this conversation can invite you on to help share that message, because I do think that apprenticeships and manufacturing and production in general, I think, is a way that we're going to get out of this mess globally. And I remember that because I was doing some research when I was a little bit younger, that America used to produce, I think it was 60% of all the products in the world. And in fact, I think it was until the 70s that to buy foreign seemed as a luxury because there was so much manufacturing in America. And it was only after 71 that it seemed like if it flipped, where, having the things that are America seem to be the thing not to have, and everything is about foreign, So hopefully we can sow some seeds and create a shift in mindset,
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So we can take a very, very short break here to say, guys, if this conversation is challenging how you think about success, education, and your child's future, pause for a moment. Share this episode with one parent, mentor, or young person who feels trapped by the traditional path. These conversations change lives when shared. If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, give this episode a like and leave a comment with your biggest takeaway so far. Follow us on Instagram at Adriano_246, at the Conscious Man 7 Podcast, and Todd Cave on Facebook to keep in contact with us. Don't forget to check out the sponsor of our show, The 𝐓𝐞𝐫 at thekambo.com, to get yourself some organite pyramids, tower busters, and some cool jewelry like what I have on today that generate orgone energy, which is the life source energy. Use coupon code CM7 to get 10% off your order. The link is in the description below. Now back to Terry. Now, what mental health shifts do you observe when young people enter careers without debt and with real-world competence?
Well, when you talk about confidence, and when you talk about, first of all, mental health is a very serious dilemma in our country. And, I'm going to go sideways for a second. And when I talk about, a minute ago, I talked about being a parent and being proud, what we should be proud of our young people. And if a young person is bullying another young person, a parent's very proud if their child steps in and supports the person being bullied. Well, bullying is a big problem, and bullying can lead to mental health problems for any young person. So I would say, we need to encourage young people to stand up for someone that's being either put down or being bullied in any way, shape, or form. Now, that being said, I think that from a mental health standpoint, when you gain confidence, and confidence is something that only you can control, right? You can't be given confidence. You can't be gifted confidence. You have to develop your own personal worth that you see from your eyes. And if you're put in a position where you can succeed, when you love what you do and enjoy and are passionate about what you do, and you feel fulfilled and you gain confidence, there's a really good chance that your mental health will improve or be the best it can be. Let's put it that way. Because mental health concerns sometimes are deficiencies in either vitamin, dietary, or hormonal, or all the above, imbalances or deficiencies. And so that being said, the best thing you can do is try to gain confidence, not overconfidence, not arrogance, but personal net worth confidence that allow you to do what you are passionate about and do very well. And as a result, potentially become a leader in what you do. And then when you get to a leadership role, not only are you helping yourself and feeding your own psyche and your own self-worth needs, but you're actually helping someone else's. And I think that's what leads to being content, being happy, and being mentally healthy.
Okay, so let's lean into that more. So let's lean into the mental health, the masculinity, and meaning. So do you believe modern society has removed meaningful initiation into adulthood, especially for young men?
Say that one more time. I want to hear that again.
Do you believe modern society has removed meaningful initiation into adulthood, especially for young men?
Well, the male role, the male gender is always been looked at as the provider. And it goes back to, days gone by, the hunter and the caregiver, so to speak, right? And I'm okay with that. Now, society today now has women, being parents without a male figure, being providers for their own. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's becoming more and more acceptable. But women mature very quickly, both physically and mentally, as young people. And so I see when I talk to young people, I remember my cousin when I was 12 years old, she was 6 inches taller than me. And we were one day apart. One day. And she was 6 inches taller than me. Over the course of time, I'm probably only 4 inches taller than her now. But metaphorically, physically, and mentally, a lot of times those parallel each other. So I think what people don't understand, just as these are my opinions, that doesn't mean I'm right, but is young men and young boys, sometimes they have a very difficult time living up to what the male figure or the male persona should be. I think in my case, I felt that athletics, I had a lot to learn from my coaches. I had a lot to give in learnings as a coach. And I think we're those of us that played sports and competed, there's so many life lessons that we learned as a result of that, or at least I did. And sometimes, young girls and young women, they don't have the same opportunities, although in today's world, there's more and more opportunities. There's more young women that are learning all sorts of roles and responsibilities through athletics as well and other extracurricular activities. So I don't know that we've gotten as a society to remove the stereotypes and the challenges for young men, and whether we should or shouldn't be is a whole different story. Because I'm of the belief, I was brought up that, look, you provide for your family, you provide for your spouse, you provide for your kids. But it's how each young person, each male, contends with that and works through that. There lies the need for mentorship. And so if you have a young male or a young man that doesn't have mentorship as an opportunity, they have all these questions and all these struggles that they have no outlet for. And I think that's as important and is more of an issue than the fact that maybe we're holding on to these stereotypes for young men that maybe should be changing. So I don't know if that answers your question adequately, but.
Well, to piggyback on what you were saying just now, I think that men today, we don't have many role models or mentors, because before, if we go back into antiquity, both men and women had like a bit of an initiation or rite of passage into adulthood. Mm-hmm. And every culture and society had a different model of what that looked like. But when you got a certain age, you would do certain things and you were taught by the men in your family to do X, Y, and Z. And it's the same for the females. When they get a certain age, they will go and hang with the women and they would learn to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And I think that, today we don't have that sort of like initiation. We don't have that sort of like, okay, to be because obviously everyone defines success, but to be a good man or a good woman, you need to do this, you need to do that. Like you said, or through evolution, men are the providers. Mm-hmm. But today, no one sits down to young boys and tell young boys, okay, Todd, so you are 15 years old now, and you're well into puberty. In a few years' time, you're going to end up becoming a father. And when you become a father, these are your responsibilities. No one sits down and tells us these things, right? And it's just the same with a female. Okay, so in a few years, you're going to end up having children. So you need to look for a man that has these skills or has these attributes, X, Y, and Z. We don't have that knowledge transfer anymore, right? So that's why I was thinking, the question was like, do you believe we do or we don't have meaningful initiation? Because especially for men, I think because men tended to have the traditional role of being a leader, well, mm-hmm. most women would say a lot of men are not good leaders. And I would say, yeah, that's true. Because we're not taught. There's no knowledge transfer. And like you being a granddad, you are now having years of experience where you can see the generation of you, your children, and now your grandchildren. Mm-hmm. So now I think that you are very well placed to have that knowledge transfer to see, well, we did this in my son's generation, that worked. We're doing this in my grandchildren's generation, and that definitely isn't working. Mm-hmm. So it was more like, what valuable lessons could you bring or teach or to pass on to young men, to help them in this journey?
Well, I think all of us have, in certain communities, there's a lot of, first of all, there's a lot of divorce. First of all, that's absolutely in our culture. Divorce has become all too prevalent. Let's put it that way. And so I agree. You have a lot of families that either have just the mom or just the dad. And there is no better or worse. A mother fills a role, a father fills a different role. And sometimes those roles flip in reverse. So anyone that has one parent available to them in terms of the family unit, there's challenges to begin with, for sure. So young men, if there's a father figure that's missing, that's going to make that's going to give them challenges. I grew up with my mom. My parents split when I was 6. And so my dad was 1,000 miles away. Now, ultimately, I ended up working with my dad in the family business, but I was probably 22 years old before that was the case. So I gravitated towards coaches. I gravitated towards family mentors and family friends, and I gravitated towards grandparents. And so if you're in that environment as a young male, you should be aggressively, or maybe not aggressively, but openly looking for that and openly encouraging that and be accepting of mentorships and whether it be coaching or whatever the source may be. There's Big Brothers, there's Boy Scouts. I mean, there's all sorts of things, right? So each of us have paths that are defined that we have no decisions on. But I think that's probably one of the biggest changes in our culture, Todd, is divorce and single parent homes. And that adds challenges as years go on and the divorce rate goes up. That leaves challenges as to, are the males and the females, men or young women, are they being prepared properly? And I think the answer to that is no. And one of the reasons is that divorce is more prevalent, and there's one parent that is trying to do the job of both. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so let's come back to like the skills gap and stuff. It is said that women and people of color are one of the most overlooked solutions to the skill gap. Would you say that is true, or is it just something that is in the media?
Oh gosh, I believe that wholeheartedly. That's a very true comment. And when I wrote my first book, Todd, it was during the Me Too movement. And the numbers that I've heard about the female gender in manufacturing is maybe 30, 35% max. And so the women that are in manufacturing have great opportunity. The women that look into manufacturing have a great opportunity. As far as people of color, when I was writing my second book, it was 2023, and it was during the racial awakening. And I thought to myself when I was writing the second book, I'm like, how did I miss speaking up for people of color? There's virtually single-digit participation by people of color. And if it's 9%, I would be surprised. And so I decided to really make an emphasis in my second book for people of color, women included. And it was I had to give myself a little bit of a break for not speaking up for them in the first book, but did so in the second book. So I think there's great opportunity. And I think what happens in manufacturing is people have a tendency to look in the most obvious places for potential employees and new blood in the company. And with the female gender and possibly people of color, you need to look in different areas, in different communities, maybe where they haven't even realized that there are opportunities in manufacturing.
So I remember when I was in England, they had like this push to try to get like women into construction and stuff. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that, from my experience, that mostly women just aren't really interested in it. Now, I don't know if that is from childhood, where obviously like boys tend to play with trucks and playing things like mud and all that kind of stuff. But I think that part of it, in terms of like for women, I think that most of them, they just don't fancy it because I guess they're not really predisposed to it. And then in terms of like people of color, I don't know. That's a funny one, because I don't know. I think maybe is like, even in those communities, they may have like a preconceived idea of like what type of jobs they should or shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. So I think possibly it could be both things, where it could be a lack of awareness on both sides. I think maybe in terms of the people in those communities, and also like manufacturers and businesses and stuff. And then on the female side, I think that part of it is that women tend to more do like things that are social, social sciences, things that are regarding people, because women tend to be more social creatures than men. Now, there are some women, obviously, that would do it. But I think that maybe is a combination of both in terms of women. But then, and then I lean heavier on the predisposition, because a woman would see a job that's like, for example, in construction, bending steel, you know what I mean? Helping lift up pallets and all that kind of stuff. It's not that women can't do it. I just think they're just not wired to do it. So what do you think about that?
Well, I will say I'll differ in a little bit, because I see in assembly positions and quality inspection in manufacturing, I will go into a company that does a lot of assembly, and that's all I'll see is women in assembly, because their dexterity actually, these are gross exaggerations and prototypical stereotypes, and so this is not always the case. But female women a lot of times will have dexterity over and above what a male has, and their attention to do one thing and not try to change something and do one thing very well over and over, they have a tendency to do that. But prototypically, stereotypically, they won't lift, as often, heavier items. Although, I had a young lady that was going to offer to help me load something in the back of my car. And I said, no, I'm not having you getting hurt because of me. He goes, Terry, I'm a power lifter. And I'm like, oh, I said the wrong thing to the wrong young lady. I said, hey, I'm just trying to be a gentleman, and I don't want to have you hurt. And come to find out, you could do probably a better job at lifting this than I could. So I apologize. But I think in the people of color community, I think there's many communities that manufacturing and other career sets that are out of the norm, there's just a over exaggerated situation of lack of awareness.
Okay, so hopefully with this podcast, we can bring a little bit of awareness and shine a bit of light on that, because I think that, like I said, because being in construction, I think it is a lot to do with lack of awareness that is even possible, because, there's some women that I've seen are pretty good carpenters, because that is really attention to detail and stuff like that. So, hopefully, younger people, young boys and young girls would hear this podcast and say, well, you know what, maybe I can have a future in manufacturing, and, especially girls knowing that they have better dexterity, maybe talking a potential 6-figure job here, that they can be on assembly line just putting stuff together, Yeah,
no, there's great opportunities for everyone, but I think sometimes there's a little bit of the good old boy club in manufacturing, and we as a community need to be more embrace both people of color and the female gender in terms of welcoming and encouraging and supporting them. I've heard women that try to get into manufacturing careers, and they find it hard to break the mold, so to speak. I've heard that from people of color as well. So I think as a community, manufacturers and those of us that have been in manufacturing for a long time, we need to go out of our way to support both the female gender, women in manufacturing, and people of color. And if we haven't already, I've been a big supporter of both, and I will continue, but I'll encourage others to do the same.
Okay, awesome. So let's shift gears slightly. So would you say, is meaningful work a form of healing?
I think meaningful work is always healthy and always a positive reinforcement. They talk about when you make a checklist, and every time you check a box, that you get endorphins, and it raises your your mental state and your how you feel about doing your job. So when you consider that, and you think about doing meaningful work, making a difference in someone's life, they talk about manufacturing where, someone's on a project that ends up being on Mars, that's, extremely inspirational and meaningful. the work I do at Champion now and the work I do with mentoring young people, that's extremely meaningful for me. And I think absolutely and positively it's therapeutic for sure.
And I would second that and say that when you find something that is your purpose, something that is your calling, something that agrees with you really well on a soul level, even if it is a job, you tend to perform really well in it. You don't really think of it as work. And I say to people that I would be a coach and a podcaster for free, but the only issue that I have is that I have this slight addiction to food and shelter. So I have to charge for my coaching and stuff. But I would totally do this for free if I had food and shelter provided for me, because I love helping people. I love seeing people get into shape. I love to see people breaking through their plateaus, both mentally and spiritually as well, because obviously the physical ones are easy to see. Yep. So I say to people, if you are doing your purpose or the thing that gives you the most joy, it doesn't feel like work. And in fact, you probably would excel in it more than other people that are doing it just for a paycheck, because you tend to work longer hours. You tend to work, like you give more because it's your passion,
Yeah, when I coached travel soccer, Todd, I did that for free for 25 years. And I know 1 year I actually sat down and calculated it was about 600 hours of my time for that year. And I
Wow.
did that for 2.5 decades. And that was therapeutic for me. I worked excessively long hours at work and in a high stress environment. Everyone looked to me in the small company for leadership, and I would literally be on the soccer pitch, in a tie, and loosen my tie, and I came right from work, and so I got home at 8:00 at night, and after it got dark out during the nice season, and grabbed a bite to eat, sat down, and had some conversation. It was almost bedtime by then.
It's true. But that's awesome, and I find that the way the world is shifting now, more and more people are going to start looking to find and to do things that are in alignment with them, or gives them like feeling they have a purpose. Because right now, what's happened is that we've been sold a dud, as we say in England, and the model isn't working anymore. And just working for money or working a job because you have responsibilities isn't cutting anymore, because at a soul level, we're broken. And then that leads to all other issues, which are the issues we're seeing in society right now. So this is why I'm really happy to have this conversation with you and to touch, move, and inspire people to see, well, actually, you know what? There's another possibility that can be created,
Yeah, I think it's there's Harry Mosier, who founded the reshoring movement here in the U.S. He talks about, before you go down a path, make sure that you have your goals and your quality of life and your status of what you want out of life before you choose a career, before you choose a path to be educated for that, so that priority and those goals are in alignment with what your compensation is, and how much free time you have, and how much you spend time with your family, and whether or not you have the ability and the time to volunteer and be a coach and not get paid for it, rather than maybe be a coach and have it as a career set. I could have been a coach easily as a career set, but I felt that going into the family business and working in manufacturing would allow me not only the compensation and the security, but give me also the ability to choose to do other things and not get paid and have the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. So let's look at the future legacy, and let's give people a little bit of a possibility that they can create. So if nothing changes, what does the next generation inherit economically and psychologically?
Wow. You got some deep questions there, Todd. I think you went on ChatGPT and said, what are the most difficult questions I can ask Terry? Say it again because it was pretty profound.
Okay, so basically, the way the world is now is that we have this particular paradigm that we're in. And obviously, kids are going to university, getting all this debt and coming out and just trapped in this cycle. So if nothing changes, what does the next generation inherit economically and psychologically?
Well, I think what I don't want, and what I would not suggest, is that every mom and dad, every child convince themselves that the only path to success is what we've seen families do for decades. And that is go into this career set, go out and take a student loan, or have mom and dad drop a boatload of money down and have you figure it out, when you go to college. I think we've talked about this, that there's a small double-digit percentage that's good for. In your case, with civil engineering, that was probably perfect for you. You're the rarity, Todd. You I think you said 14 years old, said, I want to be a civil engineer. That is so rare that people know that that's what they want to do, or that they know what they want to do. So what I would challenge is mom and dad and son and or daughter to sit down and say, okay, you're really good at this. I've raised you, I'm your parent, and let's talk about something that, you're just can't get enough of, or you can't do enough of. And how can we turn that potentially into a career set that will make enough money for what your goals in life are in terms of travel, status, luxuries of life that you feel like you want to have. So I think we need to break that mold. And I think every parent and every child or every student that's listening should carefully look at what their path will be. Hopefully they have a mom and dad that's as good as your mom was, as being open to what was important to you. I think as parents, we owe that to our children. And sometimes parents, we naively just assume that because, we suggest something, that's what the child wants. And it's fairly normal for young people not to know what they want. So that's up to us as parents to challenge them and say, why don't you consider this? Why don't you do an internship there? So from that's economically, so to speak. From I think the other term you were saying was spiritually or
psychologically.
Psychologically, thank you. Psychologically, I think a lot of what we've talked about, Todd, is how people feel in the career that they're in internally, psychologically, and how good they feel about their purpose or their career and what they can accomplish. And is it moving the needle in humanity based on my internal definition that my psyche to be fed, that I'm making a difference and I'm doing something that's worthwhile. And if I'm not doing it, someone's going to notice that I'm not doing it. And I think that the next generation and following generations, I think they deserve to pay more attention to that and ask more questions of, what fulfills them. It's like, you hear in movies and hopefully in couples that, that, my better half and they fulfill me or they make me a better person. My dad said when I got married, Carrie, you're a better person by marrying the person you did. And I'm like, okay, I'm one of the lucky ones then. Well, the same thing in a different way applies for what you choose to do in life. It has to suit you and it has to make you a better person.
Yes, I totally agree. So piggybacking on what you were saying about parents, what role must parents, employers, and communities play to rebuild a culture of purpose?
Well, I think parents are a tremendous influence. I'll start there because they are the most important influence of children and young people in this world. And they should be. So I think sometimes parents feel uncomfortable guiding their children. Sometimes parents guide their children what they think is right or conventional or safe, or prototypical. And I think we can do better as parents. We can do better by knowing our child. You know your child better than anybody in the world. So let's get more accustomed in our culture to challenging our children and asking them, what is it you want to do? And if they say, I don't know, don't stop there, because they're going to say, I don't know. Say, okay, let's talk about it. I noticed that you spend a lot of time doing this, and I noticed that you say you want to do more time spend time doing that. As far as employers, I think the day has come that employers need to be more receptive to the individual, and this is about, let's go on the employer side and say, look, retention's important. Finding a good employee and keeping a good employee. So conventional concepts of either vacation or work time or conventional compensation. The old way, if someone was unhappy, would give them more money and think that satisfied them. That doesn't satisfy everybody. It maybe in the day it did, but a lot of the generations now, they want more quality time. They want more paid time off. They want more experiences at work. So I think employers that keep doing what they're doing are going to keep getting what they're getting. And in manufacturing right now, we don't have enough young people coming up. The young people that are in our fold are being thrust literally into management positions that they're really not ready for. I think mentoring has to be embraced by the employer and by the employee, and reverse mentoring needs to be introduced. So I don't know if I hit on everything, but I think that's some of the facets that you were asking about.
Yes, and what about communities? What role do you think they play?
That's a hard one. I think communities need to be more responsible in, I'm going to turn the word communities into culture and almost use them synonymously. So I think our culture, i.e. our communities, can be more accepting in promoting something like manufacturing, to be more encouraging and supportive of like Manufacturing Day. I'm on a committee, economic council in my community here in Illinois, and I'm trying to have them make a case to make available to parents of a certain school district, to make parents accessible and available to go to a machine tool show. It's called IMTS in this country, International Manufacturing and Technology Show, which is in Chicago. And so my community, I'm trying to orchestrate where they'll offer and organize a train, which is in our community, down to downtown Chicago, and orchestrate transportation to the show, and then different visits in different parts of the show, so that they can identify and communicate with their child on classes that they're taking in the manufacturing sector, in CTE. And so that being said, now all of a sudden the community and the culture is being supportive for the parents to understand what young people are looking into, and they may discourage their child to look into manufacturing. They say, no, I haven't heard much. There's much of a future in that. But instead of that, flip it over on the other side and say, all right, I'm going to double down and I'm going to go what they're going to in terms of the show and learn, so I can have a very intelligent conversation with my child on whether it's a good decision or not.
I like that, because I think that skills are actually quite important. And even though I don't have children, I have thought about it a lot. And I'm like, if I were to have children, what would be the most important things for them? And I keep coming back to skills. So whether that is languages, because I speak both Spanish and Portuguese fluently, so they will be learning those for sure. because I would speak to them in those languages. Then skills, because when I was in Barbados, I grew up on a farm. So it would be having an idea of animal husbandry, how to grow food, I like motorbikes, so how to ride motorcycles, and all that kind of stuff. So skills, I think, are very powerful and very important for youngsters, because it means that when they become an adult, because they've had a plethora of experiences and they have a lot of skills, what will happen is that as the world changes in the future, they can adapt and they can use skills that they had acquired when they were younger and help to create a new possibility and stuff for them, So what you're talking about is the International Manufacturing, something you said, sorry?
International Manufacturing and Technology Show.
Yeah, I think that sounds awesome, because you see a bunch of different types of skills, and there has to be something there that a young person would get interested in, because it's obviously with your hands, and having a skill set is what makes you stand out and be unique, and that's how eventually you create a good career and stuff
One suggestion, I'm going to use your example because I think, Todd, what you just said is awesome. But I think the other thing that I would say is be a role model to your child in learning new things about something you know nothing about. And then show your child that you're open to learning new things, and show them the process that you go through of learning new things and evaluating, is this for me, is not. Because, it goes back to, teaching a child to fish rather than giving them a fish, or teaching them how to acquire new skills or be open to new skills, in addition to giving them, helping them with skills. So I think a parent, our children emulate what we do. And if we do something good, great. If we do something bad, not so great, right? So one of the things my father, he was medically challenged his whole life, from 16 years old all the way to almost 86 years old. And he thought he was going to perish and pass in his 20s or 30s. He couldn't even buy life insurance when I was born, when he was 21. Well, what I learned is that I'll use the term pivot, but he had to learn how to address each medical challenge that he had, and he embraced it. And so he was constantly learning, constantly adapting, constantly pivoting. And so that's a skill set that if every parent demonstrated themselves, and that could be emulated by your child, that's a pretty good life lesson right there.
That's brilliant. And I like that. And that's probably why I am the way I am, because my father is a jack of all trades, and I always saw him trying his hand at something new. Mm-hmm. And basically, because I'm the elder, like I would be watching him and, getting involved sometimes and everything like that. So you actually made me think just now, like, yeah, I know, see why I have the personality I have, where I tend to try to learn new skills regularly, and it's because of that influence. So what would you say to a young person who feels lost but knows the traditional path doesn't fit?
I would say manufacturing's here waiting for you. It may or may not be for you, but with the internet, with YouTube, there is no excuse for young people today. They're probably within an hour of this show or an hour before we're on YouTube, right? And so if you don't know to do a Google search on manufacturing, if you don't know that that's something you should search, you may never even find out about it. And I tell young people, I say, look, if manufacturing is not for you, that is perfectly fine. It's not going to be for everybody. But if nobody in every 100 young people, if one or two young people know about manufacturing, well, that's unacceptable. If we have 100 young people searching manufacturing, there may be 40, 50% out of the 100 that are like, this is pretty cool. Well, now everybody wins. The manufacturing community wins. Our country wins, because now we have the next generation. But most importantly, that young person found something that could change their life. And it's usually double-digit percentage of people that look into it that actually find a home there.
Okay, awesome stuff. So let's get you on this one. How can people listening today become part of this movement? Not someday, but now.
Well, the reason I named my organization Champion Now is that, you need to do something and you need to do it now. Our country, the U.S., is desperately in need. There's people that want to grow their companies and they can't grow their companies, not because the business isn't there or that they don't run their companies well. They simply don't have enough people and skilled people to feed the machines, to service the machines, set up the production line, assemble their products, all these above. So in terms of getting involved, go to championnow.org. Send me an email at terry@championnow.org. I have songs on there to look at. My YouTube page has educational videos to look at. I've got podcast interviews on there to listen to, 2 books to read on audiobook or in print. And so what I try to do is give unconventional or not very easily found ways of communicating all this information, all these stories, so that young people and even adults that are changing careers can learn as much as possible about something that could literally change their life.
Okay. And tell us the name of your books and any other things that you want to plug and any other things and projects that you have going on that people can get involved with, and basically everything Terry.
Well, Champion Now is a lot about everything Terry, and that'll change going forward. But the first book I wrote was in 2018 called Finding America's Greatest Champion. And basically, manufacturing's America's greatest champion, but I also talk about our youth, our greatest champion in our country, and the female gender, as I spoke about the Me Too movement, that we need more of the female gender involved in manufacturing. One thing I will allude to that I should have is the subtitle is probably my favorite part of both books. Building Prosperity Through Manufacturing, Mentoring, and the Awesome Responsibility of Parenting. So when I first wrote the first book, Todd, if I just wrote it about manufacturing, chances are the only people that read it are people that already don't need to read it, and they're in manufacturing. So what I tried to offer as a value add is to talk about mentoring, which is very important to me, and talk about parenting, which is the ultimate in importance. And that's why I call, parenting an awesome responsibility, because it is. And it's a gift. It's a gift for those that choose to be a parent. The second book is called Inspiring Champions, and here's a key word, in advanced manufacturing. Manufacturing is no longer the dead-end, dirty, dangerous job. You have to be safe and everything, no doubt, but it's very highly advanced and very technologically advanced. So this one says, discover the path to a debt-free career. And there's just too many young people that are going into student debt. So this is the parent edition. And then on the other side is the student edition. So you can see that, the artwork and the storyline, so to speak, is the same, but this is written from a student's perspective, and then this is written from a parent's perspective. So those are the 2 books, 2018 and 2023. In 2023, I also started Camp Champ. And Camp Champ is a mobile pop-up manufacturing lab where we actually make, in fact, I pulled this aside to show you, we actually make wooden pens and pen cases with CNC machines. This is the pen that we make, and we CNC computerized numerically control. We CNC turn the top of the pen, and we CNC turn the bottom of the pen. And so we have 6 stations. One's inspection, one is CNC turning, another one is CNC milling, which is what we do for the case that the pen goes in. That's where the pen goes right there. That's CNC milling. Then we
Nice.
have assembly to assemble the pen, and then we have laser engraving, because these take about an hour to make because of all the top and the bottom and inside and out. So what we do is we have a cardboard box, and we end up, you can see that without the glare, but we laser engrave every young person's name and their logo of their school and the Champion Now logo in the box that the pen goes into.
Nice.
So when everybody leaves, they actually have a pen in a box with their name on the laser engraved on the nameplate. So there's all these computerized processes, and it's a mini assembly line, manufacturing line. And if out of every 100 young people, if 2 to 7 out of 100 know the word manufacturing and have some concept, that would be a lot. By the end of the program, of the camp, we have somewhere between 47 to 55 that now are raising their hands saying, hey, I want to learn more about this. And so if they go home and tell mom and dad how excited they are, they're all pumped up. They got a hat. Some of them get a hat with Camp Champ on it. Everyone gets a shirt, not this shirt, but a specialized shirt. They go home, and the teacher will have this book and the other book that they can check out and read all the stories and all the facts and figures. And mom can read and dad can read them too, so that maybe before they say no way, no Jose, so to speak, they'll say, well, wait a minute, tell me about that book and let me bring it home, check it out from school, and let's have a meaningful discussion after we've both read the book.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I really like what you're doing, and I'm really happy that, I was able to get you on the show and stuff, although it's a little bit different from the stuff I usually covered. But I think we've shown that there's a big link. And guys, so Terry has been talking about parenting, mentorship, and being the best version of yourself. Well, I can help you to become the best version of yourself by getting you in shape. And with 2026 here now, and this is the time when people start to do all their New Year's resolutions. So if you would like to be that model parent, you are thinking about having children, and you would like to get into the best shape in order to become that, and or you want to be a mentor and a coach, well, getting in shape is one of the best things you can do for yourself and give you more credibility. So if you're tired of feeling that this fitness thing, and you're tired of spinning your wheels, and you would like some help and learn how to train, how to eat, and how to become the best version of yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246, or my name Todd Cave on Facebook. Send me a message. Let's have a chat and see if you're a good fit for the Compound Body Training Army. And if you are on a spiritual journey, or you would like to start a spiritual journey, and you would like some help to remove some fears and traumas, I can help you to get some magic mushrooms. So if you would like to get access to your subconscious mind and learn a bunch of stuff about yourself, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or Todd Cave on Facebook, and let's help you to start your spiritual journey or continue your spiritual journey. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do that by visiting our merch store. We have some cool tank tops, hoodies, shirts, and sweats. Link will be in the description to our Todd and Me store on Amazon. And today I have on the Todd and Me shirt.
Awesome.
So if you would like to join the Conscious Man 7 family, help support this podcast, because it helps us with things like editing and spending some time researching some cool guests like Terry. Link will be in the description of this podcast, Todd and Me on Amazon. And if you also would like to support this podcast and that doesn't really resonate with you, but you simply don't like ads, because on the podcast platforms, they have loads of ads, you can become a member of our Patreon or Locals community. And for just a few bucks a month, you can help support the podcast, get early access to all the podcasts I'll do. Then as the community grows, we'll have Zoom calls and meetups and all that kind of good stuff. So if you would like to support this podcast, get some early releases, get some exclusive content, and have direct access to me, because I reply to those messages faster than I do on regular social media, link to my Patreon or Locals community page will be in the description of this podcast. And if you are on a journey where you just don't like have all those EMFs, and you can visit our sponsor, the 𝐓𝐞𝐫, at thekenbo.com and get yourself some cool orgonite towers and orgonite in general, some cool jewelry like what I have on here today. I have on one there, orgonite pendants. So you can also help support this podcast, get yourself some cool orgonite, and become part of the Conscious Man 7 family. So link to thekenbo.com will be in the description of this podcast. Use coupon code CM7 to get 10% off of your order. If this episode resonated with you and it shifted how you see success, education, or purpose, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a like, give a comment, and share this with someone shaping the next generation. And if you believe meaningful work is essential to human evolution, this conversation is just the beginning. You'll find links to everything Terry in the description below. Make sure to subscribe, as that helps the channel to grow. Terry, many thanks for being a guest on the Conscious Man 7 podcast. It was a really awesome conversation. And to all the listeners around the world, thank you for your heartfelt messages about how the podcast has been helping you to navigate through these challenging times. Your kind, thoughtful, and encouraging messages keep the fire burning in me to keep improving and bring more fire content to you. We aren't just a podcast anymore. We are a movement, and we are the Conscious Man 7 family. This was another episode of the Conscious Man 7 podcast, the place where we go beyond the veil in search of the truths they hide from you, help you become better parents, mentors, and leaders of the future, help you reclaim your power and step into the truest version of yourself. You are the help that you've been looking for. So remember, folks, keep smiling, keep shining, and keep being the change you want to see. Speak to you soon. Cheers and namaste.